So what are we going to do if they're not safe, Mike? What are we going to do if they're rusty or worn through or the rock's super sketchy? It depends. And you know what? In climbing, a lot of the time, the answer is going to be it depends. I'm going to give you systems and ways to think about things, but it's going to be context dependent, right? So here's what I mean by that, and here's some scenarios that you might choose to do different things. So if the bolt itself is loose, sometimes you can hand tighten it, and this, you can't trust it to last forever. It's going to jiggle loose again. What I do, and this was recommended by the Squamish climbing community, is I actually always bring a wrench, a bolt, a washer, and a hanger to repair bolts. And this just gives you the ability to, if you find one bolt that's just loose, I don't take this up with me. I just leave it in my bag. But say I go up there and I'm like, oh, this bolt's super loose. I can just I can hand tighten it, set up an anchor as long as I or you feel safe with it. And then you can go down to the bottom and send your buddy up with this wrench to actually tighten it. If it's only a loose bolt and only if you have one of these. Some people have like a smaller version or a cut off version. I throw that in my bag. I've only had to use it a couple times, and sometimes it's on bolts on the way up. Loose bolts, easy in my opinion, just hand tighten it. If you have nothing to tighten it with, we'll get into reporting climbs later on, but it is worth telling the community, hey, there's a loose bolt here. Hey, this bolt is like spinning or bent. So something that maybe won't end the day for you and you can still use the climb, up to you. But I usually just hand tighten it or crank it tight with my wrench and then game on. If you get to the top and it's rusty, if it's rusty or corroded and you're like, holy shit, I don't want to trust this anchor with my life, you kind of have to make a decision there, right? This is why it depends. If it's easy to get to the top and walk off, like whenever you're climbing above an anchor, you're basically in a scenario for a lead fall on the anchor. And if it's already a rusty thing and you don't know if you can trust it with your life, then you really have to be careful when you're considering going past an anchor, especially if you don't know if you can walk around to the bottom, because then you could get stranded at the top. If you can set up a temporary anchor and be lowered off of it, depending on the corrosion and rust, then just use your own basically judgment to figure out if that's going to be able to last temporarily. If you see an anchor that's like laterally close to you that isn't messed up, then you can traverse over. But remember, as you traverse to the side, if you fall, there's a big swing. So that can be sketchy. Yeah, it's a bad scenario to be in. You just want to get yourself out of it in the best way possible, whether that's walking off, traversing, or just, I'd probably just leave gear and build like a pretty bomber. Make sure it's equalized. If both of the bolts are rusty, I'd try and build it equalized, and we'll get into that later on, but making sure that there's not one bolt that's taking the majority of the weight, because if that one breaks, then the other one gets shock loaded and then that breaks. So just retreat as carefully as possible, basically. Use your own judgment based on the scenario around you. If you have a tree and you have some cordlet, then you could like wrap the tree. Ideally, you know how to do that. Just basically build the safest possible exit plan you possibly can, right? Sometimes, and I'm gonna recommend this very sparingly because you have to know how to rappel very well before you do this, but you can cause less tugging on the anchor and less variables if you set up a rappel. That's possible. Now remember, if you set up a rappel, you're totally relying on the anchor, whereas if you're getting lowered off of it from your belayer, even if the anchor blows, then you have your next piece or your next quick draw. So that's a scenario. Really just explore what's going on around you. I've never had this happen. I've climbed in pretty established climbing areas for the most part. And when I've went adventure climbing, I just haven't had the luxury of finding an anchor I don't trust. But this is where the creativity gets in, and knowing how to build different types of anchors and use what's around you can be beneficial. But honestly, sport climbing, single pitch sport climbing in North America, from my experience in established areas, doesn't happen much. If it does, find your safest exit plan. So reporting a climb, there's a few things you would do, because this is when you retreat from the climb. If it truly is unsafe, the best thing you could do is tag the bottom bolt. So you can use a piece of tape, and you would basically just pull a piece of tape off or really whatever, even if you have a little bit of cordlet or shoelace, whatever the heck you can on that first bolt to indicate to the next climber, hey, this is unsafe to climb. And this actually helps you out as well. If you see a red flag or tape on a first bolt, that usually means that that climb is unsafe. So tagging the first bolt, that would be step one. And then step two is reporting it to the community. And I don't mean this community, I mean the community of the area you're climbing in. So if I'm climbing in Vegas and I come up to a climb and it's really the anchor is unsafe, the fixed gear, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to post in the Facebook group, hey, I climbed this climb at this area. This is what happened. I tagged the first bolt. I just want to let everyone know. Most people will just support you in letting the community know. And then the other thing you can do, if there isn't a Facebook group, see if there's an access society. So this is an access society of people who usually what their prerogative is like it's a volunteer-based society that works with landowners, private landowners, or government to make sure that we can keep climbing. But they usually have access to the people who, maintain routes and stuff like that. If there's no Facebook group or community and you can't find the access society, or even if you hit both of those, if you want to be super diligent, what you could do is just call the climbing store and be like, hey, this just happened. Call the gym and be like, hey, this just happened at this climb. I'm just trying to let everyone know so that they know that this needs repaired. That's what I would do in this scenario where it's an unsafe climb. The next module, which is probably why most of you are here rather than just learning about all this sketchiness, is how to actually build and assess an anchor. So we're going to get into that next time. As I said, you can tag the little green button, the little circle with a check mark at the top left so that you can say you watched this video. And we're going to get into the next one. That's module 3. Let's do it.